Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of the 18th season of Sports Talk Philadelphia here on LaSalle TV. I'm your host, Josh Abrams, and on today's show we're going to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles and their great start to the 2018 season. And after the commercial break, we're going to come back and talk about the abysmal second half of what has been the Philadelphia Phillies season. All of this and more after this commercial break.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
And welcome back from the introduction. On desk with me today, I have Selena Bemak, Sam Brown, and Jack Rohr to talk about the 2018 Eagles and their great, maybe not so great. Well, let's talk about it, guys. The Eagles started off their season with an 18-12 victory over the Atlanta Falcons. It was ugly. It certainly wasn't pretty on most aspects. But Selena, why don't you start things off? What are your thoughts after this 18-12 win?
I mean, it wasn't pretty, but it was still a win, and that's really what it comes down to it. Like, last year, you think of the Giants game when they won on that field goal. It was an awful game, but it was a critical one, too. And I think that this is also a critical game. It builds up momentum because it's the very first game of the season, and you're playing against a really tough team in the Falcons. So it's a really great win for the Eagles.
Yeah, this matchup certainly had a lot of hype behind it, especially because of the Falcons playing us in the playoffs.
Yeah, and even though it was a great win and we said that it's an ugly win, there's no way they can be totally satisfied with that. Having been the defending champions, you've got to hold down the fort, and they need to really clean some things up on offense if they want to have more solid victories that really show we're the defending champs and we're here to stay.
That was one of the ugliest games I've ever seen. That first half, those last 2 minutes, I think there was like 6 or 7 penalties. But those are the types of games that the winning teams know how to win. They find a way to win those games, and that's what the Eagles did. So
yeah, that type of mindset and that type of culture has certainly been established in this program now. But let's recap Game 1 a little bit. It was an ugly first half, guys. I mean, there was literally no touchdowns in the first half. Very little offense. Obviously, great defense from both sides. And the Eagles' D-line, as everyone had anticipated coming into the 2018 season, just played amazing.
Yeah, if you were watching this game looking for excitement, this was not the game for that. At least not in the first half. It was actually a little bit boring in terms of the offense. The run offense was actually pretty good for the Eagles for the most part, but the pass offense was pretty bad. I don't know, Sam, if you wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, they did a great job of getting the ball to Jay Ajayi, and he had those nice carries, but it still wasn't enough to get into the end zone. But luckily, they found that way to win, like Jack mentioned earlier. Also, going on what Josh said about the defensive line, Chris Long is playing like he's still in his 20s. He registered 1.5 sacks in that game, so I think that defensive line has been it's been a great staple for them, and they just need to keep playing the way they did throughout the season.
I mean, that defensive line saved us. Matt Ryan could have gotten off some big passes, but they kept putting pressure on him and knocking him over, so he just couldn't do that.
And it was really nice to see Jordan Hicks back out there after being out all of last season. He really adds that veteran presence to the locker room in addition to being awesome on the field.
Yeah, you guys bring up great points. I'm going to start with you, Jack. You talk about Matt Ryan and the Falcons, us really limiting them. It really didn't seem like it throughout the course of the game, especially when he was completing all of those passes to Julio. But I think what Jim Schwartz had his defense do was they had them, lay back a little bit, let Julio catch his passes, let's say 15, 20, maybe 30 yards. But if they were going to play up on him and let Julio beat our corners down the field, that could have been real trouble.
Yeah, they just let Julio stay in front of them. They made sure he was in front and let him catch the passes, and they covered everyone else. So Julio was really the only option on a lot of plays.
And then, Selena, your point about Jordan Hicks being back, that obviously is a huge thing. But adding on to that linebacking core, which was really my point of concern all season, having Nigel Bradham back this week is going to be more than huge.
Yeah, having Nigel Bradham back is going to be awesome. That 1-game suspension, thankfully, didn't really affect the Eagles too much because the defense still really showed up. But he also adds another veteran presence, and I'm hoping to see a couple tackles from him against the Buccaneers.
All right, so let's move on to talking about the upcoming opponent for this week, which, of course, is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A pretty familiar team if you look at some of the position players. Let's look at Tampa's D-line. They got Bo Allen, Gerald McCoy, as you can see, Jason Pierre-Paul, who the Eagles saw a lot when the Giants came to town and when we went to the Meadowlands, and Vinny Curry as well. So let's just talk about what matchups are you really looking for, especially looking at this familiar D-line.
Well, definitely some familiar faces that we are looking forward to seeing. Vinny Curry and Bo Allen, Super Bowl champions with us last year, back again. In a way, a little bit of an advantage for the Eagles because they understand how they play their defense. So it's interesting to see what will happen.
And I think everyone involved in the players that we just mentioned are going to be playing with a little extra chip on their shoulder, having been, Vinny Curry and Bo Allen having been Super Bowl champions last season. They're going to want to show that they still got it. And what better time than now when you're playing the Super Bowl champions that they had won with.
I'm really excited to see how they interact. Vinny Curry was a player I really started to like a lot last season. Every time I'd see him make a play, I got really excited. So I'm pretty hyped to see what he does this week against our offensive line. I don't want to see him make those plays anymore.
Right.
Yeah, but Bo Allen has always been a fan favorite, so.
Yeah,
especially last season.
Yeah, it'll be kind of bittersweet watching our O-line go up against the D-line for the Buccaneers. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of this entire Tampa Bay team has to be their now starting quarterback until Jameis Winston comes back, Ryan Fitzpatrick. The very, very smart Harvard grad is now under center while Winston recovers from, I don't remember what injury it is exactly, but you look at Ryan Fitzpatrick, as it says, Fitzmagic, don't really agree with that, but his week 1 stats were outstanding. He had a 75% completion percentage, threw for over 400 yards against what I think is a pretty good New Orleans defense, and he also had 4 touchdowns. So let's talk about him and what exactly you're expecting out of that kind of quarterback and our D-line.
Yeah, I think Jameis Winston is currently suspended, so Fitzpatrick is kind of stepping in a way that he anticipated at least a little bit, whereas an injury he might not have. So I think it's interesting to see how he performed because he's definitely not been the most consistent quarterback like when he played for the Jets or when he played for the Bills, and he's really bounced around the league. And so it's kind of interesting to see him come in week 1 against the Saints, a great team, and have 4 touchdowns, including a rushing touchdown. So some people say it's fake, but I'm a little bit of a believer in the Fitzmagic.
Yeah, and Ryan Fitzpatrick is no elite quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but it really doesn't take an elite quarterback to win big games. You saw Nick Foles in the Super Bowl last year. He was not elite by any stretch of the imagination. And so the Eagles just can't lay back in playing against Fitzpatrick.
I got to tell you, I wasn't interested in that game at all at the beginning of last week. And then I started checking my fantasy score, and I had Deshaun Jackson on my bench, and he was racking up all these points. I was like, what's happening? So I tune in. Ryan Fitzpatrick's making all these throws. I don't think he can do it again. I hope he can't do it again. If he does, I'm terrified.
It's interesting you bring that up. Unfortunately, I don't think Deshaun Jackson's going to be playing. I think he's still concussed. Yeah. So that's kind of unfortunate. Whether if it's in an Eagles uniform or not, I'd like to see him out there. But Jack, you bring up a good point about Fitzpatrick. Whether or not he's able to do that or not, I think it really helps that he was playing against the Saints and their divisional rivals, obviously. So I think that kind of helps his mojo a little bit. It could have been just something in the water that was really positive for him. So just looking at the scouting report on the other side of the ball for Tampa Bay, I mentioned earlier on that Tampa D-line, the only real unfamiliar face that I'm referring to is Gerald McCoy. He has to be probably the best D tackle in that NFC South division. He's had, as you see, almost 22 sacks over the last 3 seasons. He's just been an absolute beast on the D-line. What offensive line players are you guys expecting to try and slow him down?
obviously Lane Johnson, your number one guy, Jason Peters out there. I'm a little nervous about Vaitai. Vaitai had a pretty shaky preseason, so I'm hoping that he's not matched up with McCoy. I doubt he would be anyway, but it'll be interesting to see that type of matchup from the D-line and O-line. Yeah,
now is a big time where Jason Kelsey is going to have to show some leadership to this line and stopping Gerald McCoy. You got to protect your quarterback, I said it earlier, and this is not something that they should be taking lightly. Selena, you mentioned Halapulavati Vaitai. He flat out said that he wasn't taking the preseason seriously, so that attitude needs to go.
This entire offensive line is going to stop him, whoever it is. He's getting 0 sacks this weekend.
I like the enthusiasm, Jack, and I do feel really good, especially about this Eagles O-line. I think it's arguably the best in the league. I don't think we should have any problems against Tampa Bay, and that'll lead me into our final Eagles segment, which is our picks. So let's get the picks up here. I'm feeling optimistic. I felt optimistic before the season started. I have them winning 38-24 over the Buccaneers, with Zach Ertz being my MVP. Selena, you've been pessimistic, but it seems to work because you say that they win every time you pick against them. 24-13 is your prediction, with Fitzmagic being the MVP. Sam, your prediction 32-21 over the Bucs with Jay Ajayi. What sparks your reasoning for Jay Ajayi being the MVP again?
Well, you saw the way he played against the Falcons, and they're going to give him the ball a lot. When Nick Foles gets his receivers back, then he'll start utilizing them more, but right now it's Jay Ajayi's time to shine.
All right, and finally, Jack, you're feeling pretty good about this week too, a 31-17 victory with Nick Foles being the MVP. Now, do you see it being one of those games where the Eagles get a late score to seal it, like we did in some games last year?
I just think he needed the one game to make like a chemistry with all of his receivers, and now he's just going to be making more big passes because they barely threw it downfield. Most of the first half was just like 3-yard passes to Nelson Aguilar, and that was it. So I'm feeling more big passes from Nick Foles, and that's why he'll win. He'll be MVP for this game.
I don't even get to justify my pick.
All right, Selena, let's come to you. So, I said that you like to pick against us because it's a whole kind of, I guess, superstitious kind of thing.
There is a superstitious element because it seems to be whenever I pick against the Eagles that they win. So I think I'm going to continue to do that. But I am a bit of a believer in the Fitz magic, so we're going to keep going that way. Regardless, I think it's going to be a low-scoring game because look at these defenses pitted against each other.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be an exciting weekend. I think every weekend of Eagles football is going to be exciting. But we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk some Phillies.
I think that a healthy body image means that, you are comfortable being the best you that you can be.
I think it's also part of the mental mind and how a person feels that they're perceived, because if they're confident, it's going to show in the way they act, how they dress.
If you're happy with how you look, you're comfortable, that means you're happy and you're healthy.
My ideal body image would be one where someone's healthy and happy.
If you or someone you know is struggling to maintain a healthy body image, visit the National Eating Disorder Association's website at www.nedawareness.org.
And welcome back from the commercial break. Well, we had a great segment of Phillies talk, but unfortunately we must discuss the baseball team at Citizens Bank Park. I think they're named the Phillies. I don't know what they look like anymore. It's just been, Selena, you have to take this from me. This has just been a horrible last month and a half.
You know, this season started off a bit shaky, and then towards the June and July, things really started to pick up for the Phillies. They took first place over the Braves. They were winning games after game, and it was a really fun time to be a Phillies fan. And then August hit, and then they just started losing game after game after game, and there's just so many things wrong. Inconsistency, managing is horrible, pitching is bad, hitters are struggling. Everything that could go wrong is going wrong.
Sam, how have you been feeling over this pretty disastrous?
You know, I thought that their plan was finally starting to materialize, their long-term plan, and then, like Selena said, August came around, and they haven't won a series since end of July, early August, which is just preposterous that they can't string together 2-3 wins in a row. I thought this was a team that was somewhat expected to compete, and they have, but it's the season's winding down, and I don't think they're going to make a run at the Braves for the division.
No, it certainly doesn't seem like it. About, let's say, a week ago, they were 3-4 games out of the division and the wild card too. You got to remember that. But the wild card is just too tough to try and get anymore because there's 4 or 5 teams that are ahead of us, and the Braves are starting to win their games somewhat consistently. The whole subject of this thing is that the Phillies have just been horrible the last month and a half. And to be more specific with our struggles here, I have Scott Kingery and Cesar Hernandez being the beginning of that struggle, simply because they usually bat in the beginning of the lineup. Cesar, being our leadoff guy for so long, has just tailed off this season. And then Scott Kingery, after signing that large contract coming into 2018, he has not lived up to the hype so far. Only 1 year for him, but how are you feeling about him specifically, Selena?
About Scott Kingery?
I know you.
I mean, I think initially signing him to a large 6-year contract was a bit of a mistake because they didn't really have that many expectations from him, and it's still very early in his career. But I mean, some of his struggles I would attribute to him moving around the lineup so often and him not being a full-time starter anymore, and it's just, I don't know with him. He's just so inconsistent. He'll go on great hitting streaks, and then he'll just fall off like nothing.
Yeah, and about that monster contract he signed before the season started, he just mentally wasn't ready for it. I think that added a lot of pressure to him to perform, and like Selena mentioned, with him moving around the lineup and around the field a lot, he doesn't really have I don't think he really has a sense of home that he can what's the word I'm looking for? That he can settle into and become the player that they expect him to be. I really think he would have benefited from maybe a couple weeks in AAA, but he didn't get that, and now it just seems like they're forcing him into the lineup every day, and it's just not a situation that he's properly equipped to handle.
Right, and I'm glad you bring that up, because I think going down to AAA has certainly helped certain Phillies players. You looked at Hector Neris and how much struggle he was going through, and then he comes back and wins reliever of the month. You can't really do that to Kingery, especially with that big deal that you signed, because then fans are just going to go. I mean, at this point, the Phillies really can't do anything right. They could have made that move, and the fans still would have had backlash on it and simply pointed to the deal. But just looking at the whole team struggles, we love getting on base, but we don't love scoring runs.
They cannot score to save their life. And then even when guys like Aaron Nola pitches and he has a great game, he only gives up 1 or 2 runs, they can't score to support him, so they end up losing. So, what's the point? Yeah,
and looking at these off-season acquisitions that we got some big bats, I guess you could say, with Justin Bour and Wilson Ramos. He was always a big slugger in Tampa Bay. And then Asdrubal Cabrera, the veteran from New York, it just hasn't panned out the way the Phillies wanted to, and kind of alluding to what you said, Sam, about their plan working out, it just hasn't gone the right way.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a combination of the young guys not being mentally ready. With bringing in all these veterans, it may cause some clashing in the clubhouse because these veterans they're attuned to maybe an older style of playing the game, where these young guys are starting to play in the age of analytics, and it's just not a good storm to have.
Yeah, I agree with Sam. The way that baseball is played is changing right in front of us. It's a lot different now than it was 10 years ago when the Phillies won the World Series. So I agree that there could be some discrepancies between the two.
Yeah, baseball certainly is turning into a hit or walk, strikeout, home run kind of game now, and it's just very like weird to take that in. But looking at the other side of the struggles, we talked about the lineup, the bats. The pitching has been, with the exception of Aaron Nola, has just been very subpar, very below mediocre. You know, you're looking at two pitchers right now, Pivetta and Velasquez, that were supposed to be mainstays in the bottom half of the starting rotation, and they just have not performed, you know. And I know, Selena, you feel some type of way about Vince Velasquez.
Yeah, Nick Pivetta, I mean, there wasn't as many high expectations for him as there were for Vinny Velasquez. Last season, he was awesome. He could have been an all-star. He pitched great. But this season, it's kind of seemed like it started out that way, and he's just had so many struggles down the road. And I think sometimes it has to do with mental things, and Gabe Kapler kind of doesn't let guys stay out there to work out their issues. They pull them right away. He pulls them right away from the games. But Vince Velasquez really isn't who we thought he was going to be this year.
Yeah, I agree with Selena on that point. Referring to the starting pitching, I would like to know where Zach Eflin has been. He had such a hot first half of the season, and I'm pretty sure it's been a couple months now since he last won a game. I didn't really think about that. I mean, the fact that it's taken him probably as long to win a game as it has for the Phillies to win a series. I mean, I think they're 11-23 in their last 34 games. It's just been absolutely horrendous.
The last 10, they're 2-8.
Oh my goodness! I mean, I was saying to myself at one point, they're literally like finding ways to lose games. It's just really bad. And then, you know, putting it, I guess, really capping it up is the bullpen. What's your guys' interpretation of this, you know, this less than consistent bullpen?
The bullpen has been frustrating, to say the least. I mean, Adam Morgan, what are you doing? And Pat Neshek, who just came back not too long ago, what are you doing? Hector Neris, for the beginning of the season, was bad. We knew he was pretty bad, and we thought he was going to be better, so it was a disappointment. But at least we've come to terms with that. But he's actually been kind of a bright spot lately. But then he's also competing with Sarah Anthony, and Gabe Kapler won't just name a closer, so it's just like a competition between the two every night. But then again, the bullpen also gets overused.
Yeah, it's not. This, I guess, is really hard to summarize this 2018 Phillies team. Sam, given all of this that we've talked about, what do you think is the catalyst for the struggles
of the bullpen?
Or just in general, really.
So, if I'm going to talk about the bullpen, for now, I think it's the starters who have to be pulled too early, and they have to go into the bullpen right away. So these pitchers aren't pitching to their full potential if they have to be out there every single night.
I agree
Selena,
with that.
in terms of general,
managing all the way. Managing has killed them this season, and I don't know where Gabe Kapler is going to be at the end of the regular season, but I don't think it's going to be with the Phillies.
Yeah, that's going to be a big talking point in the offseason. It always seems to be, you know, what's going to happen to the coach in the offseason. But we're going to move on to Fast Five now, and Selena, I'm going to come right to you. Over under 250 passing yards from Nick Foles.
For this upcoming week?
Yes.
Under all the way. Especially with Alshon Jeffrey not back yet, there's no way he reaches 250.
I think I'm with you on that one. Sam, do you see Gabe Kapler? We just talked about him. Do you see him being the manager for 2019?
I'm going to disagree with what Selena said. I think he will be back. I think this town's a little too harsh towards him in his first year because he was bringing in a completely unorthodox style of managing that the city had, or baseball had never really seen before up until this point. So I think he'll get a second chance, to say the least.
All right, Selena, we're going to come to you with a Sixers question. It's been a long offseason, and we still have a little bit of ways to go until the home opener against Boston. But after the offseason they had, are you feeling positive or negative after last season?
I'm feeling mixed emotions. We haven't seen much of Markelle Fultz, but I think that's a good thing. I think he's in development. I think he's working on his shot. Ben Simmons is not dating a Kardashian anymore, so we're good on that front. Joel Embiid was kind of playing with lions, so I'm not really sure what he's doing. Yeah, but I'm feeling positive. I think they're going to come out strong in the season.
Yeah, Joel's an interesting character. He should be the positive one for the season. Sam, we're going to come to you with a Flyers question. They made some off-season moves, and that included getting James Van Riemsdyk back. How ecstatic are you to have him back?
I'm very ecstatic. I mean, they went to the Stanley Cup final with him, and he played really well with Giroux. He's a local kid, so maybe there's going to be a little more fire in his game now that he's back home and playing with Giroux, who, like I said, he had a great chemistry with all those years ago, and I expect that chemistry to return.
Yeah, definitely can't wait to get back into some more Flyers talk. Selena, last but not least, hitting home runs has been a struggle for the Phillies this season, and Hoskins somehow has 30 home runs, which leads the Phillies by far. Do you see him being our home run leader for next year and years to come?
Yes, Rhys Hoskins is really starting to step into his role, and I think he becomes the Phillies' main power hitter from here on out. It's really nice to see him kind of find his stride. Obviously, he's not the most consistent hitter, but he can hit those home runs really well, and so I like to see him do that in the years to come.
All right, well, we appreciate you guys tuning in and watching us today. This was obviously the first episode of our 18th season. You can catch us on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LaSalle.edu/LaSalleTV. We appreciate you guys tuning in, and we will catch you guys next week. Everyone have a great weekend.